have a guest joining me in studio who's very familiar to all of you. Of course, his name is Steve Millington. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party, and we do this on Tuesday mornings between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. And a week ago today, he was sweating out the primary, and that's because all the committee people were up for re-election as well. There was a coin flip going on, I think, yesterday, wasn't it, in Ada County, where
Yes, there was one in Ada County.
because there was a tie in one of these races for
Yep.
local committee.
So all of the precinct committee positions within the state of Idaho were up for re-election in the primary election 1 week ago today. In Twin Falls County, that means we had 44 separate precinct races. So we had some changes. Some people did not survive the challenge. Most of them did. We have 3 new precinct committee persons. I could be wrong on that. There might be a 4th one. But so we did get a few changes there. And that is always interesting. Everybody says, well, yeah, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is, according to the organizational rules and statutes in the state of Idaho, the primary election, the election of precinct committee people, those precinct committee people are the first line or the first voice from the population in general. You know your precinct committee person. They're in your neighborhood and in your area, and you should be familiar with them. And you can call them and say, "What are you people doing?" Or "What do you think about this?" Or "Why don't you change that?" Or and that's how we kind of gather information to pass on to other elected officials, be they county or state or national. Let's get real on the national. We don't have much input there, but we do very often on state and local issues. We'll gather up all kinds of information. Um, Often I will get an opportunity to visit with either county or state representative people and say, this particular issue, have you heard about this thing coming up? Or you may want to call Sally, she has a question about this, or Billy's concerned about this one here. And so that we can pass this information on to them and they can follow up your concerns. So we now have 44 re-elected precinct committee people. Now, the state statutes also say that we must, I don't think it's a state statute. I think it is one of the rules of the Republican Party. What difference does it make? It's either state or state rules. We have to reorganize within 10 days of the primary election. and we have to wait. The primary election was a week ago today.
Right.
The county clerk certified the election results and has the information available of the official winners at the county clerk's office. So we will get copies of all of those notices of the election. You won, and give them to the precinct committee people. And then they will vote for the reorganization of the Twin Falls County Republican organization. Now, the Democrats do the same thing, just like we do. So they will be having their reorganization matters or meetings the same way that the Republicans have theirs. Now, the Republicans have their meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock in the Twin Falls County West Zoning Administration Conference Room. And that's on the ground floor in the kind of the southeast corner of the building.
Plenty of parking, if nothing else.
Yeah, plenty of parking there, you bet. Sometimes we need all that parking, but so what goes on in the organization meeting? Well, the first thing we do is pass out the certification of election to the successful precinct committee people. And then those 44 people will elect a new party chairman, county chairman, a vice chairman, secretary, treasurer, state committee man, state committee woman, state committee youth. That's somebody under the age of 40. Youth to them has a much different definition than somebody under the age of 40. And then we have an ad hoc group of 5, what we call directors. And they're just people from within the party organization that sit on the executive committee to assist in directing the affairs of the Twin Falls County Republicans. Now, once that particular meeting is finished, and it should not be too long, However, you never know. We could have challenges on everyone, and in the past, we have had challenges on every one of those races, and so you have a nominations, one, two, three people, and then you have a vote, and then you go to the next position, and you have nominations and a vote, and so every time you have a vote, um, sometimes it's as simple as a raise of hands. It can, however, be a written ballot, so that everybody would write the name on a ballot and turn them in, so that it becomes kind of anonymous, if you will. So it could get time consuming, but not really that much.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about primary results and also an upcoming state Republican
We
convention,
do have one of those too.
and they have been exciting in the past. So we'll
Oh boy, have they ever.
have to bring the
Whoa.
lieutenant back in to take care of
Yeah,
things.
we need lots of lieutenants on that deal.
20 minutes away from 9 o'clock. Steve Millington is our guest from the Twin Falls County Republican Party. Bill Colley as well on KLIX. As mentioned, Republicans in the state of Idaho actually have a state convention coming up in just a little over a week. In fact, it probably won't be anything like Washington State, where they're looking to bolt from the national party. And
Yeah, I don't. I don't anticipate. We tried that 2 years ago, and so we kind of were on the leading edge of that thing, and everybody else is behind us on that one.
Steve Millington is in the studio with us, and he's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. It's 8:44 and it's 49. Bill Colley with you as well on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Our telephone number 736-0300. They're talking, in fact, in Washington State about putting all those delegates into Ted Cruz's basket, as if that'll matter at this point. But it looks as if a lot of the difficulty that the GOP had in Idaho a couple of years ago is now a thing of the past.
Well, I wouldn't call it a thing of the past. I think perhaps we the portions of the party which want to maintain a strong, viable Republican Party without veering too far way to the right or way to the left. Um, by definition, the Republican Party is a right-leaning organization. We are on the right-hand side of the road, regardless where you're going. That's kind of by definition. But we have some people who want to hijack the party, and I think to their own purposes. Not a good thing.
I heard some complaints after the primaries last week, and I thought, if you're that worried about it, then get more votes than the other guy.
That's what you have to do. We had a couple of precinct committee races that were as close as one was by 2 votes, one was by I think 18 votes, and so you just in those situations you ask yourself, boy, if I'd have made just a half a dozen more phone calls, what difference might that have made? Um, okay, that's one of those things. One of the things that we have to do as Republicans is get our message across and let people know that we are the organization which basically encourages faith, family, and freedoms, and we subscribe to that philosophy much more vigorously, and we support it and proclaim it much louder than anybody else does. And so, if you're inclined to have in your ideological makeup the idea of faith and families and freedoms, then you really want to be doing Republicans.
No, I had a friend who was your counterpart in Sussex County, Delaware, named John Riley, and John's son later went off and became the lobbyist for the American Legion on Capitol Hill, the national lobbyist. Very good family. They had like a dozen kids in the family, and they're nice people. But John told me one time, he said, for all of the complaining he hears from people on the outside about how the party works and the decision, he said, I'll tell you what. He said, I got started as a volunteer. I showed up and they put me to work doing some of the grunt work. And he said, I did that for 7 years, and then I ran for office. And then I came back later on and became the chairman. Maxine Bell told me a few weeks ago, she said she spent 10 years as a volunteer.
That's right.
With the party before she ever even
ran
was
for
approached.
public office.
She was approached about running for office at that point. So these people are bringing this up, and they're saying that the party is really, if you'd like to change the party,
Get involved.
Get involved. That's the point they make.
Come to the meetings. Get involved. Listen. Watch what's going on. Ask questions. You may not be able to change much, if anything, on the initial approach, but you'll become familiar with what's going on, and you'll be in a position to change opinions and change directions. I have a lot of people who come to me and say, Millington, what did you do that for? What did you do this for? Then I will ask them, well, where should we have gone? What should we have done? And after I get a good understanding, a better understanding of what their concerns are, then I can express my position on that thing. And between the two of us, we can have what I refer to as a good conversation. And we come up with, oh, yeah, I see where you're coming from. And I, at the same time, will tell them, that's a real good point. I'm going to remember that.
We have a caller with us. And caller, you're on the air at 8:48 with Steve Millington this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I was listening to your description of the Republican Party, and I agree with you somewhat in Idaho, but I think in a national consensus, the Republican Party has gone away from those principles. We have right now a representative in this district that does not represent those values, I don't think, not the way we want them to. And you say get involved. I've been involved. I've been in the precinct, and it doesn't seem to make any difference. So to me, it's just lip service. You're saying we're the family of the party of family and got apple pie in America, but I think that the party has gone too far to the left in that regard.
Can I add something to that too, Steve, before you comment? When I went into the polls last week, I did notice that Mike Simpson had a challenger. Yet she didn't make much of a challenge. So for all of the talk about him, no one apparently better in the voters' eyes has ever stood up.
Well, and his challenger this year was a woman who had two first names, I think. Was it? I can't remember. Mary
I recall
Ellen or
the name, seeing it on the ballot. Yeah.
But and 2 years ago, he had what was mounted as a very strong challenge from Brian Smith, and one of the difficulties we have with the incumbents is that they become so entrenched and they become so the name recognition and the following becomes so strong that it's very, very difficult to tip over incumbents. 2 years ago, the Assistant Majority Leader in the House of Representatives, Eric Cantor from Virginia. Have I got the right name there?
Yeah.
He got tipped over. And we're looking at a couple of other people. I can't tell you the name now, but there's a challenge being mounted against one of the Republican leadership. And the challenger is very, very close in the polls. So the incumbent is being challenged strongly. This is our caller has a good point. I sometimes become as frustrated as his phone call expresses, and that is, come on, people, let's get real here. But I would answer this way. Sometimes when we go to the family reunion, we have the crazy uncle, and we might be a little bit dismayed by some of his actions, but he's still the crazy uncle. And if somebody outside shows up and starts bashing the family organization, we don't really care that he's the crazy uncle. He's still part of the family, and we're going to you're going to have a problem. We're not going to let you destroy the family.
We have another caller with us coming up on.
I hope
on 8:51. It's 51. In fact, is the temperature, and you're on News Radio 1310 KLIX with our guest Steve Millington.
Good morning.
Yeah, except we don't defend that uncle when he shows up with a hatchet and hacks up a family.
No, we don't.
The Democrats and Republicans anymore are just two different cheeks on the same hind. I mean, they really, the only thing that they agreed on in the last 4 years was TPP, free trade. Free trade has come from the Republican and the Democratic Party for the last, I don't know, however many millions of years. And all it's done is hose the American people. We need a strong third party. This is, just to the point of ridiculousness.
So start one.
What?
So start one.
There was a
third one.
Start a third party.
There's a lot of third parties out there already. If they could get on the same platform with debates and everything else, and people could actually hear their opinion.
There's an interesting article about a third party candidate, and it's posted this morning on Red State Morning Briefing, and I'm sorry, I can't. I think it's just called Red State Red State Briefing or Red State Morning Briefing, one or the other. I apologize about that.
Erickson's old
Yeah,
publication
it's
before he
Eric
sold
Erickson's
it.
old
Yeah.
publication. It's called maybe it's called Red State Morning, and you can just Google it and find it. This morning, their lead article was, "It is time for a third party," and then they always have like 5 or 6 guest editors that publish. They're not long, maybe a page and a half in length, and they this morning 3 out of the 5 articles was about how we could put together a third party a third party run and make it successful this year, because so many people have this sense of angst or anger or dismay with both the Democrats and the national parties.
Well, you got Bill Kristol. He wants to start a neocon party, and then you've got Gary Johnson with the Libertarians.
Yes.
Except he brags about smoking dope just a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want his hand on the nuclear
No,
button.
me neither.
So who are we going to go with?
You got the Red State Morning guys, and they've got a list. They had 6 names on their page this morning. I can't remember all of them, but their objective was, their intent was, okay, we're not going to run a total 50-state campaign. We're going to pick maybe a dozen key states and key in those states and win the majority of votes in those key states. And those states will be enough that neither the Democrat nor the Republican can win the 270 electoral votes.
This is a recipe for a Hillary Clinton presidency.
And then, that's exactly what I read that this morning, and I thought to myself, it's time for me to send a little reply to some of their stories. I get dismayed with the state of affairs in both the Democrat Party and the Republican Party. And as I'm sure many other people do. I read an article just a couple of weeks ago from a guy named James Dale Davidson, and he said people are not voting for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, especially not Donald Trump. They are voting against the establishment.
I'll just throw in this as well. For all the talk, we need a third party. Well, have you ever gotten involved in the Republican Party, as Steve just mentioned? Did you ever run for committee person? Did you ever show up and volunteer to help out? Well, no.
Well,
no, I didn't do that.
It's really hard to. How do you put together a third party? Okay, number one is you're going to have a tremendous amount of personal commitment and a checkbook. Sorry about that. Because it's going to take you some time and some money to get it off the ground and get it running. And we have seen some of these small hanger-ons like the Constitutionalist Party and the Pro-Life Party and some of these things, and they just don't get any traction. They have a small core of people who vote because they have a one item agenda.
We have maybe one last caller we can squeeze in. Caller, are you with us? You're on the air.
Thank you. You said, Steve, earlier that there's a faction trying to take over the Republican Party. What did you mean by that? I'm just curious.
Well, we have a group of people who are dismayed with the direction that the party is trending, and they want to
like our callers,
some of our callers, and right. They want to derail the Republican Party in the state of Idaho and replace it in measure with items that are way more to the right.
Which again, if you get involved and you get your people elected at the committee level,
you get the votes, and then you can get that done. But we need to understand, and part of the difficult thing is, in order to win elections, we have to have a majority of votes. Now, not that we should be sacrificing or compromising our key values. And one of those would be the strength of our nation lies in our faith and our reliance on God, our Creator, on the individuals, on families, and on each person's dignities, freedoms, abilities, and responsibilities. And we must honor those key things. Well, when we begin to remove the individual from the formula or replace them with some other objective, I question that the reason why should we be doing that? An example for you. Utah does not have a primary election process similar to Idaho's. They have a state convention. And in order to get your name placed on the general election ballot, you have to win approval from the state convention to have your name placed on there. That is a limited number of people with a limited number of votes. And in Idaho, we have a primary election. We had a presidential election. We had 9,600 votes. And in this past election, 1 week ago, that was 9,600 in Twin Falls County. 1 week ago, we still had over 8,800 voters in Twin Falls County making their choices known for people. If the choices are not what you want, then get involved and start with new choices. Now, keep in mind, 2 out of the 4 incumbents in Twin Falls County were defeated. So next year we will definitely have 2 new county commissioners.
I want to thank you for coming by today.
Hey, thanks.
We'll have to do this again next week.
Yes, let's do that.
Steve Millington,
Thank you.
with us, chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. One more hour of Top Story with Bill Colley is ahead on KLIX.